Hello, class. I trust you're enjoying a Theology of the Holy Spirit, TS 630 online. As we begin Unit 3 on the New Testament and pneumatology, or the Holy Spirit in the New Testament, we'll take a few minutes today to outline the key themes that are in the background of your studies this week. This includes the background of your texts such as Pinnock, Machia, and the reading in Moltmann. My purpose today is to lift out a few major themes that are guiding the conversation. I hope to be able, by lifting up these particular and specific themes, to help you in your overall reading to make sense of the direction and the discussion. First of all, let's note some of the background and thematic material going on in Pinnock. Jesus and the Holy Spirit is particularly important to the discussion of pneumatology in Chapter 3 of Pinnock's Flame of Love. At the risk of oversimplification, the basic discussion involves the contrast and sometimes competition between a Logos Christology and a Spirit Christology. Of course, this has to do with the relationship between Jesus and the Holy Spirit. The Logos Christology in the history of theological interpretation has to do with focusing on Christ as the Word, and has a strong biblical and theological element. For example, Justin Martyr in the early church emphasized the Logos theology quite dramatically. However, there is also a strong tradition in the New Testament and in early and later Christian theology on the Spirit Christology. Now, it's true that later on Spirit Christology was emphasized less and less because of the historical emphasis on the Logos theology. But in the New Testament, we find a very strong emphasis on Spirit Christology. What Spirit Christology simply means is that Jesus is understood in relation to the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit plays a major role in his identity and in his ministry. For Pinnock, a Spirit Christology, together with, of course, the elements of Logos Christology, are important for restoring the balance to pneumatology, or modern-day theology of the Holy Spirit. Accordingly, as you're reading Pinnock, please note that a restoration, or in his terms, a recovery of Spirit Christology is important. Frank Machia's work also has this perspective pretty much in his Justified in the Spirit. But Machia's text is relating the discussion of the Holy Spirit to justification and vice versa. Please note that in the history of Christian theology, especially for Protestants, and especially, of course, since Luther and the Protestant Reformation, there has been an emphasis on justification in a forensic sense, a legal sense of merely our standing or position before God. Machia's argument, and the argument of much of Wesleyan, Holiness, and Pentecostal theology, is that justification is not only forensic, it has that element, of course. It's a legal term describing one's relationship before God, but also that there is a transformative effect. The justification involves the Holy Spirit concomitantly working in the life of the believer to transform the believer's character and nature. We would think of a key word here as participatory. In other words, When we're justified before God, we're also participating in the Holy Spirit. We might also think of a term like therapeutic. There's a healing of the nature, the fallen and sinful nature of the believer that takes place. Now, of course, forensic and transformative or participatory and therapeutic justification are not mutually exclusive with each other, no more than Logos and Spirit Christology are mutually exclusive. This is not an either-or situation, but a both-and. You might note in the discussion of the reading in Moltmann that Moltmann's theological background in his overall corpus of writings has to do with the Messianic ecclesiology. Jürgen Moltmann is a very important dialogue partner for Pentecostal theology. He is not himself quote-unquote Pentecostal. He has very much been involved in dialogue and worked together with Pentecostals, and much of his thought is intriguing and interesting from a Pentecostal perspective. Partly this is because in his effort to reclaim a Messianic ecclesiology, in other words, to think of the church in terms of the identity of Jesus as the Messiah expected by the Jewish people. In this particular approach, Messianic ecclesiology, Moltmann also emphasizes pneumatology or the Holy Spirit, simply because that this is part and parcel of the New Testament portrait of the Messiah. So it's very pneumatological in nature. Moltmann's reading is important for us this week because it emphasizes a very classical and sophisticated approach to ecclesiology, the doctrine of the church, that integrates Christology, the Messiah, or Christ, with pneumatology, or the Holy Spirit. So in his Messianic ecclesiology, Moltmann integrates Christology, pneumatology, and ecclesiology in a dynamic way. Now, one thing that you will notice in Moltmann is that after he has laid his theological foundation, he tends to make political and social applications of his theology. This, of course, is a legitimate approach to doing theology and to interpreting or applying its implications. However, it is important to note, or at least significant for our purposes this week, that one may or may not agree with all of Moltmann's theology or the implications and applications he draws from it, while yet also still appreciating his integration of Messianic ecclesiological and pneumatological themes and dynamics. Most of all, note that all of these, Pinnock, Macchia, Moltmann, are reacting against what has historically been a binitarianism, not Trinitarianism, but binitarianism. That is, that much of Christian theology, although it theoretically and technically accepted the Trinity, by focusing on the Father and the Son to the subordination and almost exclusion sometimes of the Holy Spirit, it has in effect been binitarian instead of Trinitarian. But there is an effort to correct that trajectory, mistaken trajectory in today's theology. What I have attempted to do today in these few minutes is to point out that in this week's study on the Holy Spirit and New Testament, there are theological themes of note that are in the background to our approach. Please note the themes of Logos versus Spirit Christology, the nature of justification as either forensic or transformative, or in our case we would argue both, and how that Messianic ecclesiology can integrate pneumatology and apply it. Thank you very much, and have a blessed day.